Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, welcome. Today on the podcast, a Silicon Valley design leader gives a masterclass on learning to be an outsider while on the inside. We'll hear how Ehab Bandar had to design his own career to become a design leader himself. Ehab is a creative man and a sought-after product design consultant for startups and fintech. He has helped dozens of teams and organizations design new digital products and bring them to market, including Charles Schwab, Wells Fargo, Bank of the West, Boost Mobile, Intuit, and Airbnb. But what's amazing about his career is that he's managed to do it while being both an outsider and an insider in remarkably different ways. Trained as a city planner, he started his career as one of the youngest technology managers at Wells Fargo, then left corporate and went on his own to advise and lead design at fast-growing startups in Silicon Valley, at digital agencies and corporate giants. And now he's the founder of BigTable.co, an experienced design agency that partners with product teams to build human-centered designs at scale. In this episode, you're going to learn how Ehab Bandar used the tools of city planning and curiosity to hone his craft in the tech world, how a quarterly print newsletter he started in grad school out of boredom led him to work in the dot-com boom, and how being an outsider as an immigrant from Lebanon made the act of observation and discovery a daily habit. And you can learn more about Ehab's work at ehabbandar.com. We'll go over that towards the end. So that's all coming up. But for now, I'm going to welcome Ehab Bandar to Work from the Inside Out.
Well, thank you so much, Tammy. I'm super delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to have you here. So thank you so much for joining us from your home office in the lovely Bay Area of California. And as you know, we love to begin at the beginning. So take us back to some of those early formative years and tell us a little bit about where you began and how some of that may or may not have informed where you are today.
Yeah, I'd love to go back. I mean, I think kind of the origin story, if I had to look back on the common thread, is definitely change. As my family immigrated when I was super young, when I was 6, as you mentioned, we're from Lebanon, and literally moved for different countries, different places. And until I got into 7th grade, I had never had back-to-back school years. So that kind of formed me to be both sort of an outsider and an insider in that respect. In the sense also, I was sort of became an observer of things around me. And one thing I didn't mention is that I was actually a pretty, kind of hard to believe, but I was a pretty shy kid who had a stutter. And so I was definitely the kid who was sort of always looking and observing. And with all the changes, I had to find ways to get in to different cultures, different people. And I got in there through just, listening and also cracking a few jokes every now and then. So,
So I'm curious about that, all of that, because you describe it in a way that sounds like you just were naturally an observer and a listener. You could throw in a few jokes, but I could see being the new kid all the time, coming from, a very different culture, different country to the US, even those early years, I could see where it must have been difficult on some level.
Yes and no. For some reason, I always was welcomed very warmly. So I think
nice.
that's one of the things that it always stands out with me. And I think it's partly why what I do today is sort of hospitality in some ways. It's
Mm,
digital hospitality.
yeah.
And I was received very warmly. And this idea of wanting to fit in was sort of a natural thing for me. And even though I had a language barrier, I was a shy kid. I never had a bad experience. So
Wow, that's
I was
great.
just fortunate. Um, and where, wherever I went, it didn't hurt that when I did move to California, it was, super diverse area. I was living in Berkeley at the time,
Hmm.
or near Berkeley. And so my experience was that you're dealt the hand that you're given, and you do the best you can with it.
Hmm.
So and change as a result was something to look forward to. It was you're
Ah,
doing bigger and better things in my mind. And because I didn't need, and maybe, maybe there's a little bit of like sort of this shy self-reliance, like I don't need that much to get by. I can just
mm,
sort of sit and observe. And I played baseball as a kid. I did tennis. I was a very sort of engaged kid, but I never had those experiences. Fortunately, I know it's not that way for everybody. So that's
no, but I
yeah,
think the way you depict it is really key. You talk about being shy, but also being engaged. And
yeah,
I think sometimes we automatically, I think I did too just now. We automatically go when we hear about a shy kid, right? And a
yeah,
shy kid who stuttered. And
yeah,
on top of it, you came to this country not knowing the language.
yeah,
Um, so, there are a lot of, barriers, let's say. And so there's this image of, well, if they're shy, they must be afraid, right? But what you're saying is you just naturally were observant. It wasn't a lack of engagement. That was who you were. You were just, you know, you were
yeah.
quiet. You observed and took things in, but you also participated. I'll also share that I happen to know that you in your very early time in the US, you were in the Boston area and that you have remained a Boston Red Sox fan. I just thought
Absolutely.
I just thought I'd throw that in there. Um,
Yes, and a lifelong Red Sox fan, for better or for worse.
well, that's how it goes, right?
That's right.
So take us forward. I mean, obviously you address the stuttering because I'm not hearing any of it now.
Yeah.
Um, and you speak English. So there's a few things that changed over the years. What else changed?
Well, it's funny. The way I got through the stuttering is I noticed that if I was, so I actually went to a speech coach, and whenever I was with a speech coach, I wouldn't stutter. It was the
Hmm.
weirdest thing.
Oh
And I
gosh.
realized that if I'm sort of on the spot, I don't stutter. So in college, I was still stuttering up until college. I actually went to Boston College, as you know,
Hmm.
and I volunteered to be on their radio program to face the stuttering.
Wow.
And it taught me. So I was literally I was like the morning news reporter for Boston College Radio, and it that really helped me to focus on how, I don't know, how to breathe, or how to speak from a different part of my you know body. It definitely changed me. So that kind of got me past that. And then from then on, I wasn't afraid of stuttering. Even if I did stutter, it was more of like, Biden's a stutterer, and you can
Right.
still hear it a little bit.
Yeah, you can.
And I've been fortunate that it's kind of just went away
Yeah.
over time and through kind of sheer will. Um, but yeah, in college, I studied political science. I was still one of those kids who had a lot of diverse interests, but wasn't very focused on what I wanted to do with my career yet.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was still kind of a liberal arts degree as broad as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I was at college.
Mm-hmm.
So I can continue if you'd like in terms of what
Yeah,
happened
sure.
next.
Well, we know you didn't become a radio DJ either.
No, don't have the voice for it. And again,
But,
I'm still a shy kid at the end of the day. So
well, no,
yeah.
but engaging, but very engaging. So, yes, take us forward.
So moving on out of poli-sci, I knew I wasn't going to become a lawyer or a politician, and frankly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was still exploring. Did some traveling, backpacking in Europe to kind of figure out what's going on. But I've always, even as a kid, I've liked to create stuff. Like I remember sitting and creating a building out of a cardboard box, cutting out the windows.
Yeah.
So, but we were a middle class family. The idea of getting into the arts or design was nothing that was not even an idea that was broached. My dad was a small business owner. He's an accountant. So the creative side of me never kind of shined at all. So I was exploring after undergrad what to do. I had a couple of small part-time stints. And then I knew I liked business and I knew I liked architecture. And I figured that city planning was somewhere in between.
Right.
Which for better or for worse, it wasn't quite that way. But
Right.
I got a graduate degree in city planning. So that's when I did urban design. But that's also when I got exposed to some amazing technology like AutoCAD and GIS. And I kind of fell in love with more of the technology to design. And so that's what kind of a little bit opened the door for me there. And then I got bored at grad school, and I started this newsletter, which was a traditional. So this is back in the 90s, right? So a traditional newsletter, getting a bunch of different folks to submit different ideas about urban planning, design, theory. And then I remember after the first issue, the second issue came out, and a buddy of mine who was a lot more techie than me said, "Hey, why don't you create a website for this stuff?" And I'm like, "What is a website? And what is Unix?" And so he taught me a couple of Unix commands and some HTML. And then the next issue, I started creating a website for it, just self-taught. Fast forward, so I get out of city planning school. I moved for my then girlfriend in New York, really desperate for a job. I find this gentleman who was helping me find a city planning job. That was a toil, because just it's really hard to find those kind of jobs. I was looking upstate New York and so forth.
Yeah.
And then in passing, because of my sort of web experience at the time, literally, if you knew anything about web design, web development, you can get a job.
Right.
And so in passing, I told this gentleman who happened to be the head of corporate communications at Citibank, "Hey, I know how to build websites." And he said, "Well, we could hire you for a couple hours a week. We're working with this creative agency in Soho." And so I did that for a while, and then I realized that I was not bad at it, and that I was having a lot more fun at it. And literally at that point, I completely turned away from city planning, which I was sort of didn't have a real passion for.
Right.
I had passion for creation and design,
Right.
and that stuff. And that was a really exciting time in the late 90s. So I was doing something that I truly loved, and I've been doing it ever since.
Well, and then some, right?
Yeah. We kept going. So I would say, so I was there for a couple of years, and I moved back to San Francisco, which is where my family is based. And that's primarily because of all the different startups happening, and the excitement there. And I dabbled in a couple of different creative agencies. I worked for another sort of tech company. And then I got recruited at Wells Fargo to be their youngest tech manager, managing all their internal websites. So I was basically like I was basically a little creative agency within the bank itself. And that was super fortunate in that I had a wonderful mentor. I got to dabble in both the design, the technology, and almost be like again, like an internal agency. So I was working with different heads of departments and divisions to build their web presence. And so that got me into the door of this entire world of both management, but also a lot of creative work.
And all of this was self-taught or in one way or another. I mean, it's not like probably, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what it was like back then. I think I knew some other people who were doing things like that.
Yeah.
And I think most of them were self-taught, but I would say within a few years of that, there were a lot of universities that were coming up with programs and more formal training. And so
That's right.
You found your way into this and through all of this, basically, I'm assuming just learning as you went along and acquiring new skills or learning how to do updated software, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think early on, I had a different path. I could either go in the programming route, the engineering route, or the design, kind of more of the management side of web.
Right.
And once I realized that if I was trying to do both, I would do both poorly. I realized that if I just focus on that learning path, and so I learned everything about design, everything about development, everything about sort of how do you manage a project from beginning to end. And that's the part that I like. I liked designing things that were easy to use. And so part of that is just sort of your intuition. You're also your curiosity. You can get a lot out of just that part of it. And on the technology side, most people know this, but you could look at the source code of any web page and see how they built it. And I really liked that. I was a strong math person, so it was sort of a kind of a natural translation for me. And I think whenever you are really curious and really interested, and in that time, and it's still happening, but the pace of change was so fast, so you're constantly having to learn. There's really no class for that when things are changing that fast.
Right.
Even like today in AI, there's no class to figure out what's in ChatGPT 4.0. You just have to read the source code. You have to read the README code. So and that for me, and then obviously surrounding yourself with like-minded people, you start to understand what to do, what's going on. And I did learn something. This was back in. I remember meeting a gentleman back in Citibank. And we would have this consultant come in, and he would fix all of our Mac issues, all our computer issues, and he seemed to know everything. So he would come in, and he had this wonderful life where he would like travel to Colorado and ski, and then come back to New York and work on some things. And he was independent. And I remember this kind of stuck with me. I said, "Well, how do you know all this stuff?" And he said to me, "I don't. I just like challenges. I get the problem. I get the research. I research it out, talk to my folks, go to the discussion forums, and I figure out the answer." And that mindset of saying, you know what, I don't need to know everything, but I need to know how to get the stuff that I need is something I learned early on.
Wow. So it's so interesting because I watch people going into these big programs, master's programs and things. And I'm thinking, I wonder when they get out, if they're really going to know what they need to know, given how fast everything's changing. But I'm curious how this has evolved for you over time. I mean, it's clear that you've had this innate desire to create, right? And then there's all the figuring out how things work, which is, even if you're not really on the engineering side, I think even to do the design, you have to think a little bit like an engineer in some ways.
Sure.
To I know enough about it to know that, but that's about all I know. And
Yeah.
and then you worked for Wells Fargo for how long?
Almost 2 years.
Okay.
So it was 2 years. It was through a merger. So it was like corporate on steroids between the corporate reorgs and the merger. I think it was Norwest Bank that they merged with. And so my team grew, exponentially. So I was the youngest manager, and I had a team in Minneapolis, and I really didn't know what I was doing. But I knew that at that point I stopped doing the stuff that I did enjoy, which was the design and the hands-on creative and the strategy. I was sitting in budget meetings and I was doing people management. And I knew quickly that A, I could always come back to it, but B, that I still like to get roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty. I still love the technology. So I made a conscious decision to leave and then started my consulting career at that point.
I see.
And the first job, just to give you a hint, was at Intuit back in kind of the heyday in the late 90s. And they used to call what I do a producer. So if you can imagine, a movie producer has to be involved in every aspect of the creative, the production, the staffing. That's what I did for Intuit, working on their e-commerce website. And that's always been sort of my strength, is that the fact that I'm sort of a generalist, but also can help build the right things to solve the right problem. And those sort of aspects is what I like to do.
And I would also imagine that those couple of years where you were a manager and being able to tune into people and understanding what they need and what they want, or having, let's say, a more focused period of time where you were probably doing more people management than working on design, that that definitely provided something for you in terms of having certain insights and understanding about what goes on in organizations as you go and work with various clients and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you get exposed to the different styles of people. And when you're working, especially with technology, there's a lot of ego involved. There's a lot of confidence that could look like arrogance. So, but once you understand those personality types, and that, especially in building digital products, it's a team sport. And so no matter what, it really taught me was, no matter how talented you are, if you can't work with and collaborate with other people, I don't want you on the team.
Wow.
So it's really important to be able to have that sort of cultural fit, but also that personality fit where you're open to different ideas. And so you get that one-on-one, because as you know, I mean, managers, it's almost like you're the therapist for your team. You're hearing everything, their at home issues and their coworker issues. So I get to appreciate that, and I think that made me a better teammate once I got back into the kind of the hands-on, because you end up respecting the teams a lot more. You end up listening more. So I think it did give me that. It also gave me a greater appreciation for what managers are looking for in an employee. It's that sort of, in a way, my favorite bosses are the ones who weren't involved unless they needed to be, and they knew when they had to be involved.
Right.
So it's just sort of this tactical guiding and also unblocking certain things when they need to. So I was very fortunate. Again, I think I mentioned I had a great manager at Wells Fargo and mentor who would both be a hands-on, but also know how to open doors and really know how to escalate things when they needed to be escalated.
Mm-hmm.
In today's Zoom world, the times seem to slow down a little bit. The
Yes.
resolution time seemed to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And he would just pick up the phone or walk to somebody's desk and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And I think that I still have that sort of attitude of like, if there's something that's really blocking you, let's unblock it right away.
Mm-hmm.
And through communication, you can get that. So
Yeah.
that brief time really, really taught me that.
Wow. Well, that kind of makes the case a little bit for people spending some time in the office, not just working remotely 100%. It sounds like, at least based on your experience,
Yeah,
you prefer.
it's not for every
Right.
role, but I think if you're working in the innovation space and you're trying to create something different that's challenging,
Mm-hmm.
that creativity can happen remotely, but I just feel like it's a very different dynamic and it's a slower pace. You can't read the room as much. There's not the body language. I think people, especially shy people, can't speak up as easily.
Yeah.
So if you're a good manager in an on-site, you can notice those folks who have something to say but aren't saying it. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot harder, and this may be controversial to say, but I think it's a lot harder when you have all these boxes on your screen
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to point out somebody who has an idea
Yeah.
and maybe raising their hand. But it's just again, a lot of designers are introverts, a lot of engineers are introverts.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have that sort of leadership style that brings out those ideas and
Right.
lets them hear their voices.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
No, I totally agree. And I think also that people misunderstand what being a quiet person is. Just like, I jumped to the conclusion about a shy child. Um, I've come to
yeah,
learn that people who lean towards introversion, and some, there's extremes, and then there's people who are more moderately introverted.
yeah,
Um, uh, but I've really come to learn that it's not that introverted people are antisocial or don't like to be social. They just don't want to bother with small talk.
yeah,
They want to, if you're going to have a conversation, make sure it's substantial, that, and they can be very engaging just as you are. So, I think that people often jump to conclusions about certain behaviors or ways of being without really kind of considering that we all come with sort of different styles and ways of engaging with the world. And
yeah.
but I think you're bringing up some good points that I would say there may be assumptions about, well, people who do technical work, they can stay home at work at home. And what you're saying is, there's a relationship piece of this that really makes a difference, especially in terms of the work that you do. So, and it was interesting because you went from Citibank and then you moved back to California, I think you said, and you
That's right.
dabbled in some creative agencies. Um, and then went to work for Wells Fargo, and then decided to go out on your own. So it was interesting to hear that
Yeah.
versus, for example, maybe going and getting another agency job or another job where you could just really maybe be more of an individual contributor and do the creative stuff. So what made you decide to hang up your own shingle, so to speak?
I think I liked the autonomy. I
Uh-huh.
liked the fact that I could, if I had an agency at the time, I would be more into sales and business development and trying to get more client work, and trying to figure out what my pitch was.
Mm-hmm.
What I enjoyed about being an independent consultant is that I could go into these projects that I found interesting. So I go into all these different sort of really challenging, gnarly problems, and be able to help out immediately with those problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt like I got the best of all worlds because I would partner with creative agencies. I would
Oh,
be their
yeah.
lead guy for some of these projects, but I didn't have to commit to what their portfolio was. Let's say they focus on this particular segment, and so I was kind of like the hired hitman for a lot of different agencies who would bring me on. And I like the optionality, I guess. I like the fact that
Yes.
I think one of your guests talked about the sort of this portfolio career, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize it at the time, but I like to have sort of be able to do different things
Yeah.
at different times.
Yeah.
So, and that allowed me at some point, I started building some apps on the side because I was a big cook and big into food, and I built a couple of food related apps that did pretty well. Didn't make a lot of money, but taught me a lot about technology and building apps and launching apps and so forth.
Wow, that's great. So, and you went and started doing some work with Intuit. So for that, being that shy person,
Yeah.
Either you knew someone at Intuit right away or knew they had a need. I'm sure you didn't cold call them.
No, I'm trying to remember how I got that lead. It might have been through a recruiter that found me, and and so again, back then, it wasn't, what I did was not very common. So it again, there was no real education for it. I've already had at that point, I had management experience. I had a lot of experience with Citibank and with some of these startups. So I was like a seasoned veteran at that point when I left Wells Fargo. And it was an exciting time to be there. And a lot of, again, because at that point I stopped being an introvert, and I would speak enough to communicate. But it wasn't like I was a shy kid at that point. I sort of broken through that, but I wasn't a talker either. I wasn't somebody who would constantly talk. And in my industry, it's better to listen very often because there's a lot of information you're supposed to trying to capture and then distill. So I was able to synthesize and tell the story in a better way than somebody who just kind of came in and said, I know what the right way to do it is. I always come with sort of a beginner's mind to everything.
I love that. That's great. I want the listeners to hear that. Beginner's mind is a great thing. Even though we all have maybe been around the block once or twice and we know a lot of things, when you put on that beginner's mind, it opens up things that you're going to see that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Having that kind of wonder or curiosity, asking those open-ended questions, you're going to take information in differently. You're going to be able to deal with it differently too. And you can still bring everything you know to that, but it really helps to have that for sure.
Yeah, being open to feedback. And I think seeing it through other people's eyes as well. I think all those kind of come into play, and you have to have someone described leadership as both humility and ambition.
Yes,
and I think that combination is very important. But some people think that you have to be, arrogant or just, more emphasizing your point of view. It's good to have a strong point of view, but I think Jeff Bezos said, but it has to be loosely held. Have strong opinions, but loosely held, be open to different things. Absolutely. And I don't think you can be very open if you don't have that sort of beginner's mind mindset to explore different ways of doing things.
Absolutely. So now that was many years ago, all of that occurred. You are still on your own.
Yep.
How have things evolved for you?
So one of the things that has benefited me greatly is that I am able to do a lot of different things. So from the sort of the technical project management to the creative direction. So because of that sort of diverse skill set, I was able to get a lot of different projects and continue that sort of that work that I really enjoy doing and tackling new things. I even I joined a startup. My only startup that I actually was a full-time employee. I joined it right after Intuit.
Oh,
And so I got exposure to that, but that they lost funding and they had massive layoffs and they eventually shut down. But that also got me a little bit of like, okay, well, startup world maybe not for me exactly.
uh-huh.
It's too risky. And honestly, there are it's a you have to sort of know the right people at the right point in the trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah.
But since Intuit, my focus has been really on helping startups. So that's a whole diverse array. I've
Yeah.
mentored startups in the Valley, at an incubator called Plug and Play in Sunnyvale. I built, again, several apps, done a bunch of different client work, and I've
Mhm.
continued that mainly through word of mouth. So I almost do zero
Wow.
marketing, and it's
Uh-huh.
all through word of mouth, coffee talks, you name it. And I think that's the fact that you can have a project, work with a bunch of people, they go off on their own, do their own thing. They think about you when their next big project comes
Right.
up.
Right.
Um, and because I was on my own, I didn't need that many projects.
Right.
I could have one project that lasts,
Right.
9 months,
Yeah.
and then you start to kind of plant the seeds for the next one.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and one of the other things that I did notice is that I worked with a lot of people who potentially were more talented, smarter, more creative, but they weren't on their own. It's a being on your own is a sort of a mindset, and it's for a lot of people it has a lot of anxiety. And I
Yeah.
think because of that, for whatever reason, I never feared the being on your own, the anxiety of like, where's my next paycheck going to happen?
Right.
For
Right.
some reason, I just felt grateful. I felt gratitude, and also I was decent with just managing my finances. My
Yeah.
dad was an accountant, so
Yeah.
I knew how to, from an early age. Again, partly why I got into probably Intuit is because of the accounting background and mindset and sort of the
Hmm.
financial
Hmm.
background that I had. So
That's interesting. And I know, yeah, I'm with you on that. Although I agree that a lot of our fellow, entrepreneurs do go into it, especially when they first go into it with a lot of trepidation. But I myself could not have gone into self-employment fast enough. Um, but yeah, that's why we have some people who are employed and other people who are self-employed. Um,
yeah.
so the other thing I wanted to ask you about was a weekly newsletter, The Experience Architect, that you started
Yeah.
recently. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a new newsletter. Again, I have a sort of a passion for writing, and that's how I get my sort of thoughts on paper. And I really wanted something really more personally, just a forcing function for me to write more, to get into the ideas that are formulating in my head.
Mm,
So that was one strand. The other strand is, I work in design and technology day to day, and there's a lot of what I would call sort of complexity that is
mhm.
being introduced. A lot of
Yeah.
sort of consulting frameworks and methodologies, and I kind of wanted to go back to the roots of design,
Uh-huh.
and especially design around sort of around the person first. And so it's really an effort to kind of demystify design and
Mm,
to really get us back to the basics of what it means to be doing design in the age of technology and such
mhm.
rapid pace, and really kind of go back to the core of what we need to do. So I talk about things like make to know is one of the principles that I have. There was a book about this, um, just showing that we really don't know much until we actually make it and then
Mhm.
fiddle around with it. And
Mhm.
in that book, Make to Know, there's a great story about how the Apple Store was created. They actually built a one-to-one replica of it to constantly understand what it's going to take to make this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so so that's a very basic thing. There's really no framework for it. There's really no methodology. It's prototype, design, get feedback, feel it. So part of the newsletter is really to kind of dive deep into some of the essential things that I think make up really good design and good innovation.
Wow, that's great. So we'll make sure that we have a link for that in our show notes. So what would be the best way? I know we said something at the beginning, but we'll say it again. What is the best way for people to find you and learn more about your work?
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for asking. I think LinkedIn is great. Also, my website, ehabbandar.com, are both the main ways.
Okay.
And from there, you can link to the newsletter as well. So.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. Wonderful. And one final question, and that is, you've been through a whole series of transitions in your career, decisions you've made along the way. What would be a key piece of advice that you would give someone else who's trying to make decisions now about what their next move is?
So I think I have a two-part answer to that. One is really if you're looking at a transition, really look at what you were curious about in the early days when you were a kid. I think curiosity is your superpower. Whatever you can stay committed to and what you're interested in, you'll get really good at that. And it also tells you a little bit about what you can be doing. So kind of weaving that into whatever you do in the transition. I think the other thing, and I heard this mentioned, that when you look at a new job or a new career, there's really three factors. There's the content of it, so what you're actually doing, the craft of it.
Right.
There's the lifestyle that it's going to afford you, and then there's the money part of it.
Right.
And if you get 2 out of 3 of those, that's great. And so I think very often we want all three, or we don't know what the lifestyle we want or what we want to be working on. So I think looking at those sort of three, and then it's like a sort of a balloon. You may get 2 out of 3. If you get 3 out of 3, bingo, go for that. Even go for 2 out of 3. And sometimes you may have to invest some more time until you get the lifestyle or the money that you want.
Right.
That's in a nutshell what I would sort of advise folks.
Very practical. I like that. Well, I do, because I think too often I see people talking about, you can find your dream job, follow your passions. And while I think you have followed your passions and it's worked out really, really well for you, but I think you could point out all along the way all the practical things you've had to attend to as you've made these decisions too. But the through thread has been design, to put it very simply. And that is something you're passionate about. But it's not like, oh, you're just following design and not considering anything else. So I think that's an important point. So that's great. I like it.
I'm a practical guy. What can you say?
Well, you're a practical guy who's very creative too. So I encourage people to go to your website and check out your work and subscribe to your newsletter. And I want to thank you for being here today. This has really been fun to take a stroll down your journey with you.
Tammy, this has been a thrill. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Ehab Bandar. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 248. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. If you're feeling it, please help me to inspire more people to grow their careers by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button right there and leave an honest rating and brief review. By doing so, It'll help the visibility of the podcast, which will reach more people to improve their careers. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or your local library. You can also help sustain the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is ad-free and self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.